I always had a big mouth in some way. So, even as a kid, if I liked Bruce Lee, I'll talk about Bruce Lee. I used to do Wing Chun, and I like talking about it and saying it's the best martial art. And or I used to, for example, I did some steel wire mantis kung fu. So I'll talk about that. Maybe I talked about qigong or herbal medicines or whatever I liked. I would probably talk about it in some way. And it was just natural, given the fact that I had those personality traits, that if I believed Islam to be true, I would talk about it in some way. So for me, talking about Islam and sharing Islam and articulating Islam or articulating these type of ideas is just a natural consequence of something that you love. The Prophet ﷺ said, love for humanity what you love for yourself. And this is different from the hadith that's found in the Arba'in, in the 40 hadith of An-Nawawi. This one is narrated by Bukhari, but it's in Tarikh al-Kabir. Love for humanity what you love for yourself. It doesn't even mention brotherhood. It mentions linnas, love for people what you love for yourself. Now the question is, what do you love the most? If you love Allah and His Messenger the most, then love it for other people. So share that zeal and that love and that passion that you have for Allah and His Messenger to other people. So for me, it was sort of a natural consequence. But to be very honest as well, it was also ego, especially in the beginning. It's the truth, man, and I want to prove you wrong, and I want to prove myself right.
The zeal that comes with embarking on something new.
It's always gonna be our struggle, right? So, what is the nature of the nafs? What's the nature of the ego? I always want to be right. I never want to be wrong. I always want to impose. I never want to impose upon. I always want to look good. I never want to look bad. To the degree that you reject the truth, that's the point. So because nothing wrong with looking good, nothing wrong with wanting to be right, but it has to be for truth, not the other way around. Yeah. So we get deluded by the ego, and for a good number of years I was like battling that ego, and still are, to be honest. But I think the important thing is because my initiation into Islam was problematic, because I have what some may argue as a kind of positive or energetic personality. People thought, oh, he's got it covered, because I already knew how to pray when I became Muslim. I knew sort of Fatiha, I knew one of the short surahs or whatever the case may be. So because I was praying before I became Muslim, right? And one interesting experience is when in sajda I used to speak to Allah, because I remember one of my friends, Dr. Amir, now he wasn't a doctor then, but then he became a doctor, Dr. Amir Islahi. He came to our college, not university, but a college, which is the late high school equivalent for Americans, I believe. And he basically said, and I wasn't Muslim then, he said, you're closest to your Lord in prostration. So I used to learn how to pray, because for me, the experience of prayer was very important as well. It wasn't just intellectual stuff. It was probably more the prayer that was significant for me, looking back. And I prayed, and I said to Allah, tell me, show me, what is true, are you, is this the truth, kind of thing. So I think after around 2 weeks after that, I became Muslim, as a result of, as well, what the brother talked to me about death. But yeah, so sajda was very important. So they thought I was a, positive personality, energetic, I'm confident, so I didn't really need much help. But, my basic understanding of Islam was very basic still. I didn't know why Allah was worthy of worship, but that's our whole purpose in life. I could, in an abstract way, show to you that there's a creator, that Allah, that God sent the Quran, and it's true. But everything else after that was a bit okay. There's not much there. I needed help, and I didn't know that. So there are a lot of things that I had to find out the hard way. So that's why I usually say to people that the hardest thing is not becoming a Muslim, is being a Muslim, because you need help, you need guidance, you need people to at least show you a way. And I think the first most important thing you need to show to new Muslims is focus on the fundamentals. Focus, it doesn't mean ignore other things, it just means focus on those things that are going to give you the structure, the basis, the roots, in order for that tree of Iman, of faith, to grow, so it could be fruitful. Yeah. And that is really affirming the foundations of Islam, and affirming the fact that Allah is worthy of worship, and knowing why Allah is worthy of worship, and actually following a path of worship, not only external worship but internal worship. Because sometimes we think worship is very kind of materialistic. I wear the topi, I have the beard, and I pray. but there are internal aspects and external aspects in line with our classical tradition that we have to follow. If we don't, then we don't have full Islam. So it's the external and the internal coming together. Even when you talk about the concept of worship, sometimes we're like acts of worship. But in Islam, the English language is problematic. When you talk about an action, you think about something external to you, like you're using your limbs. But an act of worship in Islam is an internal act, the acts of the heart, the acts of the tongue, and the acts of the limbs as well. So when you talk about worship in itself, you actually have acts of worship in the heart, like loving Allah is an act of worship. Gratitude, tawakkul, reliance on Allah, and then these things manifest themselves in the physical acts of worship too. So there is a combination of both. And the reason I'm mentioning this is because sometimes we focus on the external acts of worship, and sometimes we forget the internal. And what helps the internal is actually removing or being on a path of removing the spiritual blemishes of the heart, because there are 4 key spiritual diseases of the heart, which is more known in our classical tradition, but we don't really talk about them, which is kibr, arrogance, riya, ostentation, ujub, which is self-amazement, and the other one is hasad, which is blameworthy jealousy. These are the 4 main spiritual diseases, and all the other diseases emanate from them. We have the tools in the Quran and the Sunnah and the way of our scholars, the pious predecessors, to remove these blemishes of the heart. But sometimes we think this is like mysticism. No, this is Islam, right?